والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المذلومين المنتخبين المنتجبين الذين كلامهم نور وأمرهم رشد ووصيتهم التقوى وفعلهم الخير وعادتهم الإحسان وسجيتهم الكرم. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله وعلى أهل بيتك المذلومين. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة. ما خاب من تمسك بكم أمنا من لجأ والتجأ إليكم. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: وسلام عليه يوم ولد ويوم يموت ويوم يبعث حيا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Our discussion continues analyzing the ziyarah of Imam Hussein known as Ziyarat Ashura. And yesterday we discussed some ideas in relation to what was meant by the salam, of the salutations that we give to the Holy Imam in this ziyarah. And continuing from this discussion, I wish to look at the first line of that ziyarah, where we are told to recite Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. And the first question that I have, before I can specifically go to look at this title of Aba Abdullah, and what was meant by this title given to Sayyid al-Shuhada, the first issue that arises is that when I look at these ziyarat, whether it's Ziyarat Ashura or another ziyarah that is recited, I find something strange. For I said yesterday one of the meanings of the salam that I give to Ahlul Bayt, to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam in the ziyarah, is similar to the salam that I give to someone else when I greet them. And one of the understandings is that the same meaning that the salam has when I greet someone is the same thing intended when I greet Sayyid al-Shuhada and I visit him and I mention his ziyarah. So the first question then that comes from that is that if I am to greet someone, the normal practice is I greet them once, I would say salam to them once. Whereas we find in this ziyarah, or whether it be ziyarat waritha or other ziyarat, that the salam is repeated on a number of occasions, a number of times. It's not that we said Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah ya ibn Rasulillah ya ibn. No, we said Assalamu, 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 Assalamu. And so the first question that then arises is, what is the reason behind the repetition of the salam towards Sayyid al-Shuhada with these different titles and in these different ways? For when I wish to greet someone, it is enough for me to greet them once, address them once, mention their title once. The answer that was given here as to why we repeat this salam in a number of different ways is that this in actual fact is me showing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and showing the Imam that I accept these qualities of Sayyid al-Shuhada salamullah alayhi. So not only am I sending him those salutations, when I repeat and I say, Wassalamu alayka ya ibn Rasulillah, that is me saying, Ya Allah, I bear witness that he is the son of the Prophet of Islam, and he has taken from his grandfather the qualities that his grandfather had. When I then say, Assalamu alayka ya ibn Amir al-Mu'mineen, the reason I repeat it is again I'm doing iqrar. And I am acknowledging that I take you to be the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And I take you to have inherited your father. And so this is why the ziyarah doesn't just say, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, and then continue. There is a repetition of salam that we find. If that has been understood, now coming to Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. The second question I have is in regards to the titles of the Imma that we have. For when you look around, you'll find that Aimma alayhimu salatu wasalam have different titles. Sayyid al-Shuhada has the title of Sayyid al-Shuhada, has the title of Abu Abdullah. The question that arises here, which is my second question, is where did the titles of Aimma alayhimu salatu wasalam come from? Why is it that I call Imam Muhammad Taqi salamullahi alayhi al-Jawad? And I call Imam Ali al-Hadi al-Hadi. I call certain Aimma Zaki. Where is it that these titles came from? Where is it that we know to call Aba Abdullah, Aba Abdullah? And here you find an interesting narration with one of the Imma alayhimu salatu wassalam, where we're told this Imam sees one of his followers. The follower comes to the Imam when he greets him straight away tells him, tell me what is your title? What is your kunya? For example, you have someone who's called Abu Muhammad, someone who is Abu Hassan, for example. What is your kunya? So this person looked at the Imam and said, Ya ibn Rasulillah, I have heard that, I don't have any children. I'm not married. I don't have a family. So how can I be the father of Hassan, the father of Hussein, the father of Muhammad when I don't have children? And I have heard a riwayah from your forefathers who have said that if a person doesn't have any children, yet he gives himself a kunya, this is something they shouldn't do. I don't have a child, I don't have a son or daughter, I shouldn't call myself, for example, Abu Muhammad. So the Imam straight away responds and says, this isn't a true hadith, this is something fabricated. For we give titles to our children before they are born or as soon as they are born. And so we find the idea that when I am told that this Imam, for example, is given the title of Abu Abdullah, where did this come from? We're told this came from the Prophet of Islam and Amir al-Mu'mineen. That before he came into this world, or as soon as he was born, he was already given this title. For we have this idea that the title of A'imma alayhimu salatu wassalam was something kept by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Something that has been ordained by Allah Azza wa Jal for these A'imma, that each of these have their own titles. Of them is the title Abu Abdullah alayhi salatu wassalam. If this has been understood, that the title of Abu Abdullah came from the Prophet of Islam and Amir al-Mu'mineen. For we have that narration that as soon as the Holy Imam is born, he is in the lap of the Prophet of Islam. Rasulullah looks at him and says, Ya Aba Abdullah, Azizun alayya. How precious you are to me, Ya Aba Abdullah, and he begins to cry. And so this was a title, not relating to the children that Imam Hussein would have. The father of Abdullah, it's not that he has a son called Abdullah. It was a title ordained for him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If that has been understood, the third question then comes, why is it that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam has been given this title by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Why was he given the title of Abu Abdullah? What was hidden here? Here I wish to mention a number of different opinions that we are told in regards to why he was given this title and what this was referring to. The first thing that we have been told as to why he was called the father of Abdullah is, of course, Abdullah refers to the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And an abd has one very specific quality due to which the abd is called abd. He said the reason why I call an abd, a servant of Allah or a slave of Allah is given that title is because that servant or slave of Allah Azza wa Jal engrosses him or herself in the ibadah of Allah Azza wa Jal. So the quality of an abd is that the abd does ibadah. And so a number of scholars came and said, this is the reason why Sayyid al-Shuhada was called the father of the servant of God. Why? Because what is the role of a father? The role of the father is to give tarbiyah and train his child. Likewise, Sayyid al-Shuhada trained us and showed us how to do ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That he was classified as the father of all servants and slaves of God, because he told me and you how to do true ibadah. And you will find so many examples when you look at the life of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, especially what takes place in Karbala and Ashura of the ibadah of Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salatu wasalam. For I often mention, we have a very interesting narration that when Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam is attacked on the day of Ashura, you will hear of the different severity of wounds that were on his body. In fact, Imam Zainul Abidin salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi mentions that the size of a dirham, the dirham is normally said to be this size, the size of a dirham wasn't left not covered in blood on the body of Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. In other words, his body is completely covered with wounds, not even the size of a dirham is left without wounds. So when he's covered with these wounds and he falls from his horse onto the ground, there is a discussion that takes place with Umar bin Sa'ad and others as to who will, na'udhu billah, finish off the job. Who will make it that now he's dead? Who will remove his soul from his body? Who will separate the holy head of Sayyid al-Shuhada? And so you will read in the books of Maqtal that a number of different people come and try to do so. One person runs towards the body of Sayyid al-Shuhada, sees him lying on the ground. He runs back to Umar bin Sa'ad. He says, the nur on his face distracted me from killing him. So when I got to Sayyid al-Shuhada, there was nur and beauty on his face. How can I kill this person? Another person comes, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam looks at him, he runs away. A third person comes to Abu Abdullah, tries to kill him. Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salatu wasalam says something very interesting. He looks at him and says, "O Abd of God, O servant of God, did you pray your salah today?" He says, when I heard this, the person says, I ran away from the body of Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, and I told Umar bin Sa'ad, you wish to make me kill a person who even in his last moments reminds me about salah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the reasons he was called Abdullah, Abu Abdullah, is he taught me how to do ibadah in his most difficult moments. I have the smallest issue in my life, forget mustahab prayers, even a wajib prayer becomes difficult. Sayyid al-Shuhada asks Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, he says, go to Shimr and Umar bin Sa'ad and tell them that Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam wishes for one night to be engrossed in ibadah and worship of his Lord. He taught us how to do ibadah. And that's why I remember there was a scholar who lived in Tehran by the name of Ayatollah Ahmed Khunsari. During the time of Ayatollah al-Uzma Burujardi, he was sent by Ayatollah Burujardi to Tehran. He was a marja of taqleed. He has many books in fiqh and usul. And he used to lead prayers in one of the masajid of Tehran. Ayatollah Ahmed Khunsari was known for his piety, a very pious individual. So an individual, a person who used to come to that masjid, says, I prayed 20 years Salatul Jama'ah behind Sayyid Khunsari. Especially sometimes you have a alim who's very pious, you want to pray behind them. Just 20 years I prayed behind Sayyid Ahmed Khunsari. He says, however, I noticed one thing in those 20 years. That he would walk into the masjid as adhan is being recited, and as soon as he would get to the mihrab, he would whisper something. So I know that he is a person of God, he's a person of dua and dhikr. I wish to know what exactly it is that he's whispering. After 20 years, I asked him. I said, Sayyidina, every time you come and you enter, as soon as you get to the mihrab, you say something. What do you say? So Sayyid Ahmed Khunsari looked at him and said, as soon as I enter and I hear the adhan, I say, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. I asked him why. He said, because it was due to Sayyid al-Shuhada that today we have salah preserved as it is. It was due to Sayyid al-Shuhada that I have adhan and iqamah. You may think of this as oratory. This is one of the realities of this world. That the reason I have salah as I have salah and ibadah as I have is because that man sacrificed his life on this land 1400 years ago. And so this was one meaning of Abu Abdullah. He taught me and you how to do ibadah. The second meaning that we have, scholars said no, what was being referred to by Abu Abdullah wasn't the idea of ibadah and worship, was something else. And that is that there is one very specific quality of an abd. For here, the human being is called abd of Allah, the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there is one very specific quality that an abd has. And this is explained by a narration of a person who lives in Madinatul Munawwara, if I'm not mistaken. And this person buys a slave. At the beginning of the formative period of Islam, slavery is still rife in the Arab world. So this person, he buys a slave. Now normally the slave wouldn't be from Hijaz. The slave is from a different part of the world. This person, he buys the slave enters into his house, and the first meeting takes place between slave and master. The master says, "What will you eat?" He says, "Why do you ask me this?" He says, "Naturally, you can see it yourself. If you are used to a certain diet and you're given something else, you become unwell, you're unable to work. One person doesn't eat spicy and you give him spicy food, he becomes unwell. Another person is used to one diet, you give them something else, it doesn't work with them, they can't do what they wish to do." He says, "What will you eat? What is your diet so I know what to feed you so that you can work in the house?" So the slave says, "Whatever you give me, you are my master, I'll eat it." He says, "What will you wear?" The same thing happens with clothing. One person is used to a certain type of clothing, another person wears something else. Certain people, for example, they can't wear a dish dasher because they're not used to wearing it. The same thing happens. What type of clothing should I get you so that you're comfortable and you can work? So again the slave says, "You are my master. Whatever you give to me, I'll accept it." Okay, where will you sleep? What type of bed do you need to sleep on? Certain people, they've never slept on a bed in their life. They've slept on the floor. Put them to sleep on a bed, they won't be able to sleep that night. Why? Because I'm not accustomed to it. So how will you sleep? He started asking all of these questions. The slave answers in the same way. "What do you mean, where will I sleep? What will I eat? You are my master. What choice do I have? Whatever you give to me, I'll accept." This person began to cry. He says, "Today I realized the true meaning of ubudiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That if I am Allah's abd and Allah is my master, whatever He gives to me I should accept." And so one of the most important qualities of an abd is that they have complete subservience to what their master tells them. This was the second interpretation of Abu Abdullah. You showed us true subservience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How? Because we're told that when Sayyid al-Shuhada leaves Madinatul Munawwara, he goes to the grave of the Prophet of Islam sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. When he goes to the grave of the Holy Prophet and he falls unconscious, he sees the Prophet of Islam in his dream. He sees the barzakh state of the Holy Prophet. You've heard this before. I want to remind you of one thing here. When he sees the Holy Prophet of Islam, what does the Prophet of Islam say to him? He says to him, "Habibi ya Hussein, Noora Aini ya Hussein." Imam al-Hussein says, "Ya Rasulullah, your ummah is giving me a lot of difficulty. Ya Rasulullah, if it was up to me, I would wish to join you where you are right now. If it's up to me, where you are in Barzakh, I wish to be there with you, take me with you." So what does the Prophet of Islam say? The Prophet of Islam says, "Inna Allah yasha." Allah wishes an yaraka qatila. The wish of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to see you killed. He doesn't say anything else. Complete subservience to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah wishes for me to be killed, nothing else. The second question he has, what about Zainab and Kulthum and the women and children? Do I need to take them as well with me from Medina? Again, the Prophet of Islam would say, "Inna Allah yasha." Allah wishes to see them sabaya, to see them as captive. Again, Hussein is silent. complete subservience, no questions asked to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If this is what my Lord desires, then I will implement exactly what is the desire of my Lord. And so this was the second reason he was called Abu Abdullah. And Abd has nothing of its own, it does whatever the master tells him. You find this in the life of Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salam. Because if it was someone else, they would say, we'll take the women, but this 6-month-old child also? Sayyid al-Shuhada doesn't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a question. If this is the will of my Lord, it shall be implemented. There is also a third reason, then mentioned, as to why the Holy Imam was called Abu Abdullah, the father of the slaves of God. And that is that the scholars said that a slave has another property and a quality that it has. A slave doesn't own anything that it is given. Everything it has belongs to the master. And so that's why we're told, if you wish to have true ubudiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you should also realize this. You're a slave of God. This abba is on my shoulders. Does it actually belong to me? If it belonged to me after I died, I would still have it. After I died, it goes to someone else. The true abd is the one that realizes that nothing belongs to it. Everything belongs to the master. Everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you find this demonstrated by Sayyid al-Shuhada, the best on Karbala and Ashura. Why? And I wish to give you one example. One narration that explains this true ubudiyyah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. That he has in his mind, nothing belongs to me. Everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This narration is mentioned by the scholar Shaheed al-Thani. Shaheed al-Thani in one of his books. He says that there's a prophet of God. This prophet of God goes through one of the biggest tragedies that a person can face in this world. For Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi says that the greatest tragedy a person can face in this earth is that they see the body of their youthful child in front of them. I was given a son that son died at 16 years of age. That daughter died at 16. And I have to pick up their body and bury them. This is the most difficult tragedy that a person faces. This prophet of God, he faces that tragedy. His 16, 18-year-old son dies. We're told that this prophet of God has a certain role in his community. For as you know, prophets of God, Anbiya, have different roles that they are given. There are certain Anbiya, for example, they bring scripture. Certain Anbiya, the reason that they are sent to one city or another is solely to do raf'ul mukhasama, to remove disputes as a judge. So this prophet of God is sent to a certain city. His job is to judge amongst the people. The people have a dispute, they come to him, he tells them the hukum of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this issue. The narration Shaheed al-Thani says that when this prophet of God's son passes away, he closes his doors. He says, now for at least a while, I can't do this judgment. He said, why? He said, because it's been a very difficult time for me. I've lost my son. I'm unable to bear this. And according to this narration, this prophet of God wasn't the highest level of prophet. Those prophets of God that are known as ulul azm, that have the highest level of patience. No, he's an infallible prophet, but not at the highest level of patience. So he closes his door, he stops seeing people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wished to show that prophet of God the true meaning of sabr and patience. So Allah Azza wa Jal sends two angels in the form of human beings. An angel can sometimes take the shakl and the form of an insan. For example, Jibreel would often come to the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, in the form of a human being. And we would recognize that this is Jibreel, the people would say. This human being is actually Jibreel. These two angels are sent in the form of human beings, and they knock on the door of this prophet of God. The prophet of God opens the door. He says, yes. The angel said, we have a dispute amongst us. We wish for you to deal with this dispute. So that prophet of God says, maybe you don't know that I've had a tragedy in my family. And so now I don't deal with these disputes. I can't. So these two angels said, but Ya Rasulullah, we have come from very far. It's true, they were sent from the heavens. So the Prophet said, no problem, come in. They entered, they sat down. He said, tell me, what is your dispute? So one of them said, look, I have a farm. I grow crops on this farm. This other person, every single day, he has cattle. He has horses, he has cows, he has camel, whatever he has. Every single day, he takes his animals across my farm and they step on the crops, they destroy the crops, and he does this twice a day, as he is going and as he is returning. This is my issue. I wish for you to deal with this issue. This farm of mine is being destroyed by this person's animals. So of course, one of the etiquettes of judgment is you can only judge after you've heard both sides of the story completely. The Prophet of God says, what is your side? What's going on here? He says, Ya Rasulullah, it's true. Every single day I take my cattle and we walk across his farm whilst we're going to our destination and as we return. He says, where are you going? He says, I am going to a watering source, a lake, a river, so that my animals can drink water. Every single day we go there and we return and we step on some of his crops. He says, so what are you doing? Why are you doing this? He says, no, Ya Rasulullah. Ask him a question. Where is his farm? This farm of his, where is it? He says, I asked him, where is your farm? So imagine you have the main road. And there is only one path to get to that river. His farm was right in the middle. He says, Ya Rasulullah, my farm is right in this highway, this main road. Right in the middle is this farm of mine. And this is the only way to get to the watering source. So the Prophet of God, when he heard this, he told the owner of the farm, he says, when you built your farm in the middle of the road, you should expect your things to be destroyed. The fact that you placed it right in the middle. Today I placed something right in the middle of the highway. I know, of course, it will be destroyed. It won't remain. He says, the fact that you placed your farm in such a location, when you planted that seed, in your mind you would have known anyway that it will only stay for how many days? 3 days, 4 days, then it will be destroyed. So the fact that it was given to you there, you shouldn't be upset when it was taken to you away. When he said that, the angel said to the Prophet of God, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you. So what do you mean? He says, you were given a son, but where were you given a son? You were given a son in the dunya. The dunya's example is like that farm. You've placed it right in the middle. Either it will be destroyed today or tomorrow. Likewise, Allah Azza wa Jal gave you an amana that belonged to Him, but He gave it to you in the dunya. If you were given to it in the dunya, you know that either it goes today or it goes tomorrow. When he was told this, he understood the true meaning of sabr and servitude. I was given something that didn't belong to me. Either it is taken back today or it shall be taken back tomorrow. If this has been understood, we understand the true servitude of Aba Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam. For he was given a son like Aliyun al-Akbar alayhi salam, a brother like Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. But you know the books of Maqtal say, the more bodies that Sayyid al-Shuhada would pick up on the day of Ashura, the more we would see the faith on his face would increase. Why? Because he realized that I was given Abu al-Fadl. Abu al-Fadl never belonged to me. Abu al-Fadl belonged to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah gave him to me as a gift. Likewise, I was given Aliyun al-Akbar, my son. Aliyun al-Akbar never belonged to me. Belonged to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. An abd doesn't own anything. Whatever an abd has belongs to its master. This was the third reason why Sayyid al-Shuhada was called Abu Abdullah. For he taught us this idea that whatever you have belongs to your Lord. If this has been understood as to why we call him Abu Abdullah, the final question then that I have is that if Sayyid al-Shuhada is given this title, or if we have other titles given to other A'immah, does that mean that that which is found in one of them is not found in the other? So for example, today I come and say Imam Ja'far is given the title of As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. The truthful one. Does that mean that the others weren't truthful? Of course they were. One, for example, is given the title Kadhim, the one that swallows his anger. Does that mean that the others didn't? one was given this title, the one that showed us true obedience and ubudiyyah. Does that mean the others didn't have that? So why is it that one is given one title and the other is given another one? All of them have these qualities. The answer that was given by the scholars is that yes, all of them have these qualities. The knowledge that we find in the 5th and 6th Imam was found in all other Imam. However, the situation within which the Imam alayhimus salatu wassalam lived meant that different qualities were expressed during their lives. And so Imam as-Sadiq salamullah alayhi was as courageous as his grandfather Amirul Mu'mineen. But during his life, what quality did he express the most? He expressed the quality of ilm and truthfulness. He was given that title. Likewise, Imam al-Kadhim, because he spent a lot of time in the jail, he expressed that quality the most. He was known as Kadhim. And so all of them have those qualities, but it's about what they have expressed. The scholars say there is only one Imam that expressed all of the qualities that he had in his life. The others expressed part of what they had. The only one that expressed all of the qualities given to him by Allah was Amirul Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi. And that is why they call Amirul Mu'mineen the perfect human being, because he showed us all of these qualities. They were found also in the other Imam, but he showed us all of these. And from that we realize that Sayyid al-Shuhada in his life showed the most this idea of ubudiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is why he was the one that was given the title of Abu Abdullah and the others weren't given this. And so that is why we say on a day like this and a night like this, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Assalamu alayka ya ibn Rasulillah. For here we understand that the thirst of Sayyid al-Shuhada is for 3 days. Maybe even longer than 3 days. The thirst of the other Shuhada is also for a lengthy period of time. But the thirst of Zainab continues even after Ashura. Do you know why? Because Zainab says, we're given so little food and water that I give it to the children of Hussein alayhi salam. Zainab's thirst continues even after Ashura. Which is why Imam Zainul Abidin would say, I would be in the prisons of Sham. Sayyidah Zainab, when she would pray her salah, I would see her praying salah sitting down. I said, Ya Zainab, when I heard this, I remembered your mother Fatima to Zahra alayhi salam. Because these two women would never pray salah sitting down. It was only in the most difficult circumstances that both of them would pray their salah sitting down. For Zahra would sit down because her ribs have been crushed. Zainab would sit down. Imam Sajjad would ask her, why do you sit down and pray your salah? She would say, because there is so little food and water. We give it to the children, we give it to the other women. For days Zainab hasn't drunk water. For days she hasn't eaten. This is the extent to which she spends the time in Sham and Kufa. They say that the prison of Sham is such that you couldn't tell whether it was nighttime or daytime. In the daytime they are very hot, at the nighttime they are very cold. With patience they spend their time in that prison. Tonight in the Masa'ib I wish to remember what things Zainab alayhi salatu wasalam has seen. For me and you right now, we can mention the musibah and you cry. Imagine someone sees all of those things with her own eyes. And she doesn't just see what takes place in Karbala. She sees the atrocities that take place in Kufa and Sham. Di'bal is a poet. Di'bal comes to Imam al-Ridha alayhi salatu wassalam. Imam al-Ridha was seated. Di'bal comes, the poet of Ahlul Bayt. Imam al-Ridha says, Ya Di'bal, have you bought anything for me? Any lines of poetry for my grandfather Abu Abdullah? Di'bal says, Ya ibn Rasulillah, would I ever come to you without bringing you lines of poetry for your grandfather? And so Di'bal would recite. Straight away, Imam al-Ridha makes a gathering. They place a curtain and his women sit on one side and the men sit on another. Imam al-Ridha sits on the floor. Di'bal is made to sit on a mimbar. And Di'bal recites these lines of poetry and Imam al-Ridha would cry. What would Di'bal recite?
لآل رسول الله بالخيف من منى وبالحكم والتعريف والجمرات ديار علي والحسين وجعفر وحمزة والسجاد ذي الثفنات قبور بكوفين وأخرى بطيبتين وأخرى بفخ لها صلوات دئب الودسي the house of أمير المؤمنين عن حسن حسين عن زين العابدين. All of these houses have become empty, and we see Ahlul Bayt buried and scattered in different places. For there are those buried in Medina, and there is the one buried in Najaf, and the one buried in Karbala, and the one buried in Baghdad. And suddenly Imam al-Ridha comes to Di'bayl. He says, can I give you something to complete your poem? He says, yes, ya ibn Rasulullah. Imam al-Ridha would say, وَقَبْرٌ بِطُوس, and there is a person buried in Khurasan. Di'bal says, I have heard of the ones in Najaf and Karbala and Medina and the ones in Baghdad, but which of you are buried in Khurasan? And Imam al-Ridha would begin to mention how he will be killed and his masa'ib, when suddenly one of the servants from the house comes running. He says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, stop mentioning how you will be killed. Why? He says, because one of your sisters sitting behind the curtain has fainted hearing how you will leave this world. I say, sister of Imam al-Ridha, you only heard how he would be killed and you fainted. Zainab says, I saw Shemayr sit on the chest of Hussein. What would be the state of Zainab? For what has Zainab seen in these 40 days? What tragedies has she seen? For a time came that Abu Abdullah had been killed. Sayyida Zainab says, I was inside of the tents when I heard the horses are moving. Zainab says, why do horses move when the battle is over? She says, I looked through the tents, I saw the body of Hussein in the middle of Karbala. Umar ibn Sa'd tells all of the horsemen to trample the body of Abu Abdullah. She says, I saw them trample the body of Hussein. Then someone runs to the body and steals his tabayan. Someone would come and take his abaya. Someone takes another item of clothing. Zainab says, then someone would try to remove the ring from his finger, but the ring wouldn't come out. He takes out a dagger, he cuts the fingers of Abu Abdullah. Zainab says, then we retreated back into the tents. Now I heard the horses moving a second time. She said, this time I looked out of the tents. Umar bin Sa'd told his people, set fire to the tents of Zainab and Kulthum and loot their tents. Zainab said they would set fire to one tent, we would run to another until there is no tent remaining, and they would come and loot us. One person comes and tries to remove part of the hijab of Zainab. Zainab says, I held firm onto my hijab. He tried to pull it a second time. Zainab holds firm. He tries a third time. He realizes this is the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen. How does he take that which he wishes? He takes out a whip, whips the face of Zainab. He takes that which he wishes to take. Zainab sees all of these atrocities. Then she sees the atrocities in Kufa and Sham. But before she leaves Sham, what is the final atrocity that she sees? She sees the young body of Sakina bint al-Husayn. She sees the wounds on her body because they say 3 people have cried whilst giving ghusl and kafayan. The first to cry whilst giving ghusl, Amir al-Mu'mineen pours water over the body of Fatima Zahra. Amir al-Mu'mineen begins to cry. Fidda and Zainab run. They say, Ya Abul Hassan, should we help you give the ghusl? It's very difficult for a husband to give ghusl to his wife. What does Amir al-Mu'mineen say? He says, the reason I cry is I have just seen the broken ribs of Zahra. The second to cry whilst giving ghusl, Imam al-Baqir pours water on the body of his father Zainul Abidin. He would see the marks of the chains from Kufa and Sham, and he would begin to cry. The third thing which Zainab would see at this moment, the women of Syria give ghusl to the daughter of Hussein. They begin to cry and lament. Why do they cry? They say, Zainab, how much have you hit this child? For her body is covered in wounds. Zainab says, we haven't hit this child. This is the orphan of Hussein. على لعنة الله للقوم الظالمين. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون.